or you were stressed out because your test was timed and all that jazz. And if you were stressed out, I totally get it. Okay, so that's why I'm going to post a link to a do-over quiz on for the course outline. And that quiz, and I'll just show you here, right here. It's not there yet. I didn't put the link in there yet, but that course, well, here, let me actually just change that now, because this is due on, that doesn't matter what it says there. Okay, so what I'm going to do, this new do-over quiz will be due on the 18th, and it will be an open book quiz. So I'll just put the link in there. You'll have till the 18th at noon to do the course outline quiz again to get 100%. If you choose not to do it, that's up to you. But I'm giving you the opportunity because I realize Kahoots are fun, but not when they're really for marks, right? So I try not to use them for marks because there's all kinds of things that can go wrong with a Kahoot. Okay, so after class, I will post the link to the do-over course outline quiz. And like I said, you can do it anytime you want between now and the 18th, and it is open book. Okay, any questions about that? Do we lose marks for not doing it? No, Abigail, that's why I downloaded the marks from Kahoot, so that I will actually enter those marks in for you now. And if you have a do-over, then I will, and you do better. Of course, if you do worse, I'm not going to give you a worse mark. Okay, but it's an open book test. You get all the time you want to do it. There's no reason anybody should do worse. But if you're good with the mark you got right now, then that's awesome. You don't have to redo it. Okay. Yeah, the countdown it does cause some stress, right? So, and like I said, I realize that. So if I caused you stress, it was only really intentional. I had good intentions in the end. Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments or things on your mind before we get rocking and rolling here? Is it a time quiz? No, Oksana. So I think I answered that already. But no, you can take as much time as you want to write it. The only timed part is the due date and the time it's due on that due date. Okay. Anyone else? Okay. All right. So then let's do something fun like notes. All right. So get your notebook out or fire up your notes in your computer, and we will do some notes on surveys. So again, if you came in late to the class, I was asking if we did these notes last week. I don't know why I can't remember. My brain's a little foggy here. But so in our notes, we'll just call it surveys. Okay. In our notes, and I'm just going to go to Google Classroom for 1 second. Where is that? Right here. And I'll just go to this folder. So these are the readings. There's a video right here called 7 Tips for Good Surveys. I highly advise that you watch that video because on our first quiz and even on the final exam, there are several questions about this video. Okay, so it's about a 5-minute video. It's probably not the most exciting video you've ever watched, but it is definitely, if we're talking about surveys and creating good surveys for our students or our colleagues or for parents, it's definitely worth the 5 minutes. Okay, so let's just talk a little bit then about surveys. So when we talk about surveys, we're going to talk a little bit about some brain science, and we'll talk more about brain science when we investigate and do lesson planning. But basically, 20 minutes is about the length of time a person can concentrate before, and I'm just going to do a little trick here, but before they lose interest. Okay, and if they lose interest, of course, they're not going to finish your survey, right? So the science on this is super duper clear. That and then now this 20 minutes, and I'll just underline this for a second, is the time for big people, for adults, and maybe, let's say, high school students, and maybe, you know, grade 11, 12 kind of idea. And it's a typical, right, time. So it's an average or a time that most people can concentrate for before literally their brain, the frontal lobe of their brain is overflowing with information. Okay, we'll learn much more about this when we talk about in lesson planning. And of course, that 20 minutes decreases with the age of the student. So obviously a kindergarten, grade 1, 2, you know, 3, whatever student has a shorter span than an adult would. And again, typically not this is not a hard rule or law or anything, but it's about the typical amount of things. And then the other part of that is, again, when we get to lesson pardon me, when we get to lesson planning, it's 20 minutes or about 7 new pieces of information that a person can hold in their brain at one time before they need to do something with that information, or else they'll lose it, or as a teacher, you'll lose them. Okay, all right. So then, if you're going to give a survey to somebody, it should be no longer than 20 minutes. And I would actually recommend that it's not even that long. Okay, all right. So then let's add kind of like little point number 2. With more questions, comma, people are more likely to not complete your survey, to not complete your survey. Okay, and I'm just going to make a new little page here so I don't. I made lots of pages there. All right, 10 questions, and this is again based on research, right? 10 questions seems to be the optimal amount. Okay, and I think if you thought, you know, someone is going to ask me 10 questions on a survey, yeah, I probably could do that, right? I mean, just even think about, you don't even know anything about the survey, but, you know, 10 seems a reasonable number, right? Obviously, if it was less, that'd be okay too. But 10, yeah, it seems like a reasonable number. And again, the research shows that this is true here. Okay, and then some other things that made them are kind of like obvious then, like longer surveys get lower quality answers. Lower, holy smokes, Brad. Lower quality answers. Okay, and then also, if we're talking about, you know, surveys, is that people will generally invest or give their best effort, best effort on the first half of a survey, on the first half of a survey. Okay, so with that said, then, if you were when you develop a survey, what questions should you then put in on the first half of that survey versus the last half? Does anybody want to take a shot at that question? Yeah, Kaylee, yes, the most important, the ones that you really need that information for, should be the ones that are on the front end of that survey versus on the tail end of that survey. So just good stuff to know. Okay, let me just scooch down here in my notes, and then also here, I'll just say here, be mindful of the complexity of your questions. Complexity of your questions. I'm going to squeeze that in here right at the very bottom. Okay, so we said 10 questions is an optimal amount, but if it's like 10 questions where people got to write an essay type of answer, of course, that whole 10 question thing goes right out the door, right? So, so be mindful of the complexity of your questions. Let me see, what else did I miss? Oh yes, one more point about this here is that people, okay, and I'm going to throw out a word here. I haven't thrown this word out yet. So people who take your surveys or even your quizzes really are called respondents. Respondents. I haven't thrown this word out yet. So people who take your survey on a mobile phone, right? So on your cell phone, on a mobile phone, will spend even less time completing your survey. Okay. And you would almost think that would be the opposite in this day and age where our mobile devices are so prevalent in our lives and we do so much on them that it would be like, oh, no problem, just send it to their phone and they'll do it. But ultimately, people on their phone spend even less time than people like on a computer. Okay. All right. And then one other one here, just a little important note is on your surveys, oops. Always, and now it depends on the question type, but always offer a don't know, and I'm going to put that in quotation marks, okay? A don't know or a, again in quotation marks, NA option. Holy smokes, sounds like they're tearing up my front street. It's just the snowplows going by here. But so because here, I'll give you an answer. Can I pick on Shyla? Can I pick on you for a second? It's a real easy question. I won't embarrass you at all.
Okay.
Okay, so here's the question. Shyla, last year, how much did you spend on groceries?
On groceries?
Yes.
Do you want like
to the exact dollar?
Oh, okay.
Do you know?
No, I don't. I
Of
don't have a
course.
clue.
Either do I, right? And most people wouldn't, right? So that's, again, if that was a question, on average, how much do you spend yearly on groceries? It's really important to offer them a don't know option, right? Right? So, right, for sure. So, and then I can open this question up to anybody, or Charlotte, you can answer it if you want. What does N/A stand for?
Not applicable.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Thanks. Okay. Awesome. All right. We got just a little bit more notes, and then we've got some hands-on stuff to do. Just got to find my mouse arrow here. Where did it go? There we go. All right. Okay. I'm going to start a fresh page here. All right. Okay. So just sort of 7 things here. Okay. So these items really come from the video that I told you should watch. Even though I'm going to cover them in a sort of a text format, you should really still watch the video because he's much better at explaining it than probably I would be. Okay, so 7 things to know about your about a survey. Okay, your number 1 is that your questions must be interpreted in a consistent manner. Okay. And the sort of the example that they give in that video is this. And think of age groups. So if you asked a kindergarten kid this question, or now maybe kindergarten's too young, but let's say, I don't know, an elementary school age child versus a high school child versus an adult my age. Have you ever been involved or the victim of a serious crime? Well, if you are 6 and someone stole your, Pokemon cards or your Beyblade or whatever, that might be super serious to you. Versus someone in high school, if you ask the same question, or someone stole their iPhone, that might be serious. Or as an adult, you had your house broken into and everything was stolen, right? So if you were to ask that question, have you ever been a victim of a serious crime? It can't really be interpreted in a consistent manner, because depending on who you're asking and their perception or their idea of what is serious, can skew your whole quiz, right? Or the answer to that question. Okay. All right. Number 2 is that people are willing, let's just write this down. People are willing to answer your questions, but there's some kind of rules. People are willing to answer. Okay, I'm going to do some abbreviations here. Your questions. Okay, just so I can squeeze it in there. Okay, oopsie. Hold on for a second here. Sorry, pressed the wrong tool there. Get out of the way. There we go. Own questions. Okay, and then willing to answer your own question. And I want to just throw this word in here: personal questions. Sorry, it's really important that we say that. Okay, so imagine that you're a high school teacher, and for whatever reason you're doing this survey that asks this question: have you ever, or let's say, if I won't make the question, but if you ask questions, let's say about people's sexual behavior or people's sexual preferences, or something like, have you ever used drugs before recreationally, right? People may not be willing to answer that question at all. People may be willing to answer that question, but not give you an honest answer. And the way that you can get answers to very, very personal questions like that is by doing the following: is that you need to guarantee confidentiality. And generally, we do that by telling them that the only person, so if we're writing these surveys for our kids and they're just interest inventories, and we're not asking, school-age kids, generally speaking, about those types of personal things. But if you say something like, and we're going to do this when we do our survey, your answers on this survey are between you and I only. No one else will see the responses. Okay. Or you can guarantee them anonymity. I spell that right? Anonymity, right? So of course, the way to do that in a Google survey or on a Google form is just not ask for their email address, their first or their last name. Because if you don't do those things on a Google form, there is no way that you can track who answered what. Okay. And then the other one is also just to talk to them about, or ensure them that your Google form is secure and that no one else can get to it, that kind of idea, right? So, and of course, we already kind of know that when when we're sharing files in the Google environment, we can lock it down to specific people, to just yourself, to only people in your organization, things like that. So, so we need to give them those kind of guarantees if we're going to ask them those kinds of really personal questions. Okay. Number 3 is you have to ask questions on a survey that people can answer truthfully. People can answer truthfully. Okay. And I could give you a really sort of benign question where you would think that people would not maybe necessarily lie or about their answer. And here's a question that people might actually lie is, do you have a library card? Right? And you think like, oh, that's a pretty easy peasy question, but people would lie on a question like that. And the reason that people would lie on a question like that is based on something called social desirability. Desirability. I think that's right. I can't remember. I don't know if there's an E in there or not. Social desirability. If I spelt it wrong, whatever. Okay. So because people don't want to look sort of outside the norm, right? It's like, oh, you mean everybody's got a library card and I don't? Oh yeah, I've got one for sure, right? That kind of idea. So people don't want to look, you know, be thought of in a lesser type of way. So they'll lie, right? And also, you can also ask that type of a question differently. Do you access materials from a library, right? Because there's lots of different ways to get books and things like that. We know that, you know, there's ebooks, there's audiobooks, there's all kinds of different kinds of books and things that we can read nowadays, which doesn't necessarily mean I have to go to a library, right? I can get all the information basically that I want in the whole wide world just on the internet, right? So again, it's just careful how you phrase that question. All right, number 4 is the question can be easily recallable. The question it is easily recallable. Oops. Okay, and again, that was the question that I gave to Shyla, is something like, how much did you spend on groceries last year? Well, that is not easily recallable, right? I mean, okay, if you want me to answer that question, I guess I'll have to save, you know, I would have had to save every single receipt that I spent on groceries all year long. Then I'm gonna have to get a calculator out, and then I have to, you know, right? You know what I mean? So it's not easily recallable in a survey, get this done in a few minutes type of environment. So it has to be easily recallable. I mean, I could even say to some of you, how much this year did you spend on Christmas presents? And some of you may know that answer, and some of you may not, right? So even if it's something that was not in the, you know, the distance past like a year ago, it would still not be, may not be easily recallable, okay? Number 5 is that we need to avoid double, and I'm just going to abbreviate this, double-barreled, let me spell barrel, 2 R's, barreled questions, okay? And what double-barreled questions are, I'll give you an example, is, do you think the Alberta government should spend more money on education and less money on photo radar? Okay, I have asked you 2 questions, 2 things there, but in the survey format, or even in an oral format, if I asked you that, there's possibly 2 answers, but I'm only giving you 1 opportunity to say yes or no, right? So if you say yes, then what are you actually saying yes to? Are you saying yes, the government should spend more money on education, or yes, there should be less photo radar? So the moral of the story there is, if you have a double-barreled question, or you want 2 things, ask 2 questions, okay? Even if you have to kind of break the rule of 10 questions, it's better to answer or ask two questions than ask a double-barreled question and not really get an answer that is useful, okay? So you need to avoid double-barreled questions. All right, 2 more things, and then we'll do some hands-on here. Okay, avoid biased terms and or wording. Terms or wording. Okay, and of course we can think of lots of different words that are biased, or terms that are biased, but the example they give in the video is a good one. Okay, and so if you were to ask, and maybe we'd ask this to parents, obviously not to children, but are you or have you ever received welfare? right? That word has some negative connotations. So instead of saying, have you ever been on welfare? You might want to say, have you ever received social assistance or income assistance, right? It has a better ring to it. And it's really just, we're really just playing with words. But again, it's just how you use those words that people, that could offend people, right? And we know in this day and age, it's super duper easy to offend people with our words. So, so we need to be very careful. And of course, obviously, if you offend anybody with your words, you should always be willing to apologize and all that kind of jazz. Okay. All right. Now, the last one applies to not only surveys, but it also applies to quizzes and exams and things like that that we write. So the last one is pre-test your questions. Okay. And even sometimes when you pre-test your questions, there still ends up being a problem in the end. So here, when you pre-test, what I recommend is doing two things. One is you actually do the survey or quiz or test yourself, and that so that you can go through it and make sure that it all makes sense, and also that you've got the correct answers, or sometimes like in a Google form that you even have an answer for the question. Okay, so so step one would be to do, pre-test it and take the quiz or survey yourself, or step two could be ask a friend, a loved one, whoever, to actually just take it and do it for you, because they are outside of your brain, and you of course in your head know what you want or what you were thinking about when you formulated that question. But for somebody who's got nothing, no kind of skin in the game kind of idea, they may not understand. Okay. And then the last thing is just a little note, is just to remember there is no such thing as the perfect survey, question. And the same really could be said for test questions or quiz questions. They're really, again, because it's just open to interpretation, right? So that is all I want to say about surveys and all the goodies that go with creating these in Google Forms. And of course, Google Forms is one tool we can use. There's lots of other ones. Okay, before we switch to hands-on, is there anything that you need me to say again, show you again, explain, all that kind of jazz? No? Everybody's good? Okay. All right. So then what I'd like to do, or I'd like you to do as well, let me just turn my pencil off here, is I would like you to go to your Google Drive, and I'm just going to open mine up in here. And so I turned my practice folder into what's called my demo files folder. So all the hands-on stuff and all the demo kind of things that we're going to do, I just throw that stuff in here. Okay, just remember you should be in your RDP account. And so to create a Google form, you can see in my drive, and I'll just make mine a little bit bigger. The purple icons in there are Google Forms. Okay, so Google makes it fairly easy for you to recognize the different file or apps or whatever you want to call it. Okay. All right, so we're going to go to new, and we're going to go to Google Forms. Okay, and when you open up a new Google form, just click on it. Now I'm getting this message because remember our practice folder was shared, right? So it's going to, again, just warning me that saying, hey, if you're creating a file in here, it's going to get the same privileges as you gave that folder. So I'm just going to go, sure, it doesn't matter. Okay, I'm only sharing that folder with my alter ego in Gmail. Okay, so by default, all Google Forms are purple. Okay, if purple is your color, you're going to be happy as a clam, right? If it's not, purple's not your favorite color, I'll show you how to change all that jazz here in a second. First thing we need to do, like we do for all googly things and things that we're going to do for this class, let's give it a name. Okay, so I'm just going to call it practice survey because this is really what it is. It's a practice survey. I'm just going to put in section D just so that I know who did what kind of thing in my class. And of course, once you give it a name, you can give it a star and organize it using your folder here. And it also gives the name right up here. So as soon as you hit enter or return or click outside of the title, it will fill that piece in. Okay. Now in this top white bar, there are some things that we can do. I'm just going to skip over these because these have some explanation that we need to talk about, but let's just go to over to the other things. So there's this little jigsaw puzzle that is for add-ons. And if I click mine and you click yours, you should see form limiter in there. If you don't, you can add it very easily. Form limiter is just that. You can limit your form in sort of two ways. You can limit it by how many people can actually fill out the form. So an example of that would be if I'm offering a workshop and I've got 20 spots for people in my workshop, I can limit it to the first 20 people that sign up. Okay. Or I can limit it by date and time. So for example, if I'm again running a workshop and I say, okay, I need to know by Friday at 4:30 who's coming for Monday, I can limit it that way. And of course, as a teacher, you could do the same thing. If you were sending this out to parents, let's say, for instance, and you're going to say, okay, folks, I need volunteers for this field trip. I need to know this by Friday at whatever time. And then the form will close at that time and on that date. And then those would be your volunteers. And of course, the other way around, it could be, I need 10 volunteers. The first 10 that sign up are going to be the folks that get to volunteer, kind of idea. Okay. And the bottom one here is something that I add in. This is sort of a distant cousin of what you might call a lockdown browser. So when I offer, so like our next quiz, which will be on, quiz number 1, I will use this add-on to, you'll need to have your camera on and all that kind of stuff, just like you kind of do in lockdown browser. Okay. So anyways, don't worry about add-ons too much until you become a Google Forms Pro. Okay. The next one is, again, you don't like purple? Then here we go. You can change the theme color to whatever you want. Doesn't matter. Or what can happen is, and this is part of the assignment requirement. Actually, let me just bring up the checklist. Let's just make sure that we cover everything on the checklist. I'm just going to put that over there. All right. And I'll just make it a little bit bigger. There we go. Okay. So one of the first things that we need to do is we're going to add a banner, okay, or a header. Okay. So what we can do is we can click on choose image. So remember, again, we went to the palette and that brings up this little side panel. So let's go choose image. So there's a few things you can do here. Google gives you some just sort of canned ones that you can use for if they're applicable to your survey. You could upload an image, or if you've got stuff in your Google Photos folder, and apparently I don't have anything, you could add from there. But we're just going to go with themes over here. Now, here's what's going to happen. Right now, we're doing a practice one together. You're going to end up doing your own survey. And like all the other assignments in this class, generally speaking, I want you to do something that is applicable to you. So you can pick. So when we do these assignments, I always will say this: pick a grade, topic, and subject that you want to do for this assignment. Okay. Now, again, we're doing a practice one, so just follow along. But for the real one, you're going to pick a grade, topic, and subject from whatever grade it is that you want to teach. And then choosing an appropriate theme would be important. So if I was going to choose, art 10, then I would use the paintbrushes. And then once you hit the paintbrushes or any of these things, you can just hit insert. Or let's say it's a science class, there's some beakers here or whatever. Okay, I'll choose the beakers. And when I hit insert, what Google will do, it will adjust my theme for me. Okay, based on, my overall theme here, based on this image that I choose, it will change the colors. So I have a lot less options once you choose a header or a banner. Okay, and then you still are able to change a few things about it. And of course, these colors are loosely based on the colors that are found in this image. I kind of like this red one or pink one. I'll just go with that. Okay, and then the other thing you can do under this themes panel is choose a font. And what I would do and caution you is to be careful with these kind of fancier fonts. Obviously, you're not going to use a font like that with grade 1 kids, okay? Because that that would be super hard for them to read. So I would just recommend that you choose basic, but just choose an appropriate font based on the age and all that jazz of your kids. Okay, so once you've got that set up, you can close the side panel by Xing out. Okay, anytime you want to go, hey, what's this going to look like for the people taking my survey or taking my quiz? There's this little eyeball up here. It's the preview button. You can click it and it'll show what it would look like to the world. Okay, and every time you click that eyeball, it opens up a tab. So it's going to show you something here. If you don't close this tab and I click the eyeball again, it opens up another tab. And if I go back and I click the eyeball again, before you know it, if you do that for every question on your survey, you're going to have lots and lots of tabs open. So every time you preview it, just close the tab after you've looked at it. So when I usually add something, I will go to the eyeball and go, what does that look like? Oh, okay, it looks great. And then I just close the tab. But of course, if you don't mind having 100 tabs open, knock yourself out. Okay. Of course, these two buttons are do and redo and undo. I think you're familiar with those. I don't use the send button, and we're not going to use it in this class, so let's not worry about it. And then there's these buttons here, and there's all kinds of goodies here. I can make a copy of my survey. So let's say I teach 5 sections of the same class, you know, whatever, 7-1, -2, -3, -4, -5, and I'm going to ask them a survey, and this is my social studies 7 class. I'm not going to make 7 separate or 5 separate surveys. I'm going to make one survey for all of my social 7 kids, and then I will make a copy of it for each different section. So I might have 5 copies of the survey, but it's going to be 5 copies of the exact same survey. And of course, I wouldn't click this button until I know the first survey that I've made is perfect and it's the way I want to go. And then of course you could click copy. Move to trash is fairly self-explanatory. Get pre-filled link. Just gives you a link to the survey. Don't worry about that one because we'll talk about sharing this via a link in a bit. Printing, straightforward. Adding collaborators. This is the only place other than Google Sites that Google offers add collaborators. I don't know why they do that, because add collaborators is the exact same thing as the share button. So I don't know why they don't just say share it. But so if you add collaborators, if you click that, you'll see the same exact window or whatever pops up as it does if you're in any Google thing and you hit share. It's the exact same window. Okay, so again, why Google does that, I couldn't tell you. I have no idea. But just to know that if you want to share this with somebody or share it with another account or something, you need to click add collaborators. Editor, don't worry about it unless you know a bunch about coding. And then add-ons is if you want to add fancy things up here. Right? So, and if you click that, there's a bajillion of them. So, and they're just sort of, some of them you just are trial and error kind of things. You might go add on, oh, that looks cool, let me try it. And of course, you can always delete add-ons and stuff like that later on. Okay, so for now, our purposes though, you don't need to do any add-ons. All right, finally, there is the questions. Obviously, that is our sort of main window where we're going to create our questions. In this window, by default, you always get a multiple choice question. So to add a new question, you click the plus button. And I'll just show you this just to emphasize the point. You can see that it created another multiple choice question. Okay. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do either. I just wanted to delete them. So that's the plus button. This is the import questions. This one's really useful. Is if you've already created a quiz, let's say for me, like me, last semester, I created a quiz for, quiz number 1. And so now in this semester, we have a quiz number 1. And you know what? Most of those questions, if not all of those questions, are the same. I can import questions from other surveys or other Google Forms. So it's kind of a handy one. It might be a little bit more of a intermediate to advanced option. So, and we're not going to worry about that one. The T is, well, if you click it, it allows you to add a title or whatever you want. We're not going to do that either because we already have one right here. Okay. This is to add an image. This button is to add a video. And when we do the quiz form, you're going to add an image and you're going to add a video. And then this last one is what they call like a section break or add a section. And that's, you would use that one. We're not going to use it for this activity. That would be like if I was going to do a survey and one of my questions was, how do you identify? Do you identify as a male, as a female, or other, right? And then depending on which one of those they chose, it would kind of take them down a different pathway. And so that's where you would add a section break. And again, that is more of actually probably more of an advanced feature than what we're doing for this class. Okay, so that's kind of what you find under the questions, I don't know, button, tab, whatever you want to call it. Responses, we'll click on that one. Obviously, we haven't done anything, so there's no responses. So this will always tell you how many responses you have. Also, it will give you a little number right up here. So if you have, how many people are here? If we have 27 people in our class and I'm waiting for 27 responses and this says 22, and I know that this closes at noon today, I could always reach out to those people and say, hey, you still haven't done the survey or the quiz. Don't forget it. You know, it closes at noon kind of idea. Okay, so that always keeps you up to date. Also, once you have responses, there's a whole bunch of other information that comes down here. Okay. The other thing you can do here is you can turn off the quiz or survey or form. You can turn it off or on. And then you can use this little green button here to create a spreadsheet that goes and gives you the data information, like the data from your quiz or survey or your Google form in general. And then this one goes with this. And we'll talk about this once we have a form done. And then there's settings. Okay, settings is an important thing. So for this one is not a quiz, but for the next assignment, we would turn that on and make it a quiz. And then what that does is gives our questions a point value. Okay, but because this is a survey and there's no marks or anything for it, we're not going to do that. So let's click this next one here on the down arrow. Let's expand that. And again, depending on what you're doing, you may or may not collect email addresses. If this is a survey or a Google form for your kids in your class that are sitting in front of you, you don't need to collect their email addresses. You know what they are anyways, right? If this is being sent out to parents and you need to know their email addresses, then obviously you could click that on so that if you needed to get in touch with them or do some follow-up or something, you'd have their email address. Okay, and then of course you turn that on, then you can do use that. But again, we're not doing this one or this one, so don't worry about them. Allow response editing. So again, depending on the nature of your survey, you might turn that on so that even after they click submit, they could come back and go, I forgot to tell you about whatever, and they could type that in. Okay. If this was a quiz, you probably would not, or a test, you probably would not want to do that, right? Is that, you know, they get one shot at it and that's it. But again, it depends on the nature of the quiz. If it's a practice quiz, turn that on and let them just keep doing the quiz over and over and over again until they've mastered it and they get 100%. Okay. All right. This next one's really important for us when we talk about that anonymity piece and confidentiality is you can restrict this to whatever school district or school you belong to. Currently, we belong to Red Deer Polytechnic, so it can be turn on, and then only people at your school or your school district can use this form or even really see this form. Okay. Now, again, that's great if you're doing this with kids in your classroom. If this was parents or community members, you would obviously want to turn that off because parents and community members most likely would not have like a school district email address. So we can turn that off or we can turn it on. Okay, and I can't remember in the checklist if I want it on or not. We could, you know what? Let's turn it off. It doesn't really matter. So let's turn that off in our practice one. And then this one is, do you limit it to one response? So again, really basically, that really depends on what you want from them. Okay. Again, if it was a test or a quiz, you might say, yep, turn that on. They only get one shot at this. Or if it's a survey, they can only get one shot. I mean, you could use this. Here's a fun example. All right. So you're going to put out a little survey to your kids because they've been really, really good. And now you're going to have a pizza party celebration kind of idea, you know, next Friday. And so you might want to say, okay, you're going to get limit to one vote, right? You get one response. Do you want pizza? Do you want subs? What do you want? And so that prevents, you know, somebody from voting 37 times for pizza, that kind of idea. So in our surveys, you again may or may not want to turn that on. Pardon me. Under presentation, there's a whole bunch of different things here. Again, let me just collapse this window here. There we go. And so do you want to show a progress bar? We don't need to turn that on unless you have a really lengthy survey or test or whatever. The other place that turning this on is nice is if we do that branching. Remember we said, about gender. If you branch or create sections, that's nice to have on. Shuffling the question order. In a survey, there's really no benefit of shuffling the question order. This is more for a quiz or a test. You could shuffle the question order. Can I zoom in a bit more? Of course. Okay. You could shuffle in that question, or you could shuffle the questions for a quiz. We're not going to do that for a survey. Confirmation message. So let's do this. Let's go edit. And then the default response is your response has been recorded. Well, let's be a little bit more personal in that. This is a survey that we're asking of our kids, of our parents, of our colleagues, of community members. Maybe you say thank you for taking the time to complete this survey. Now again, I'm thinking this is for my kids. I look forward to learning with you, or something like that. Okay, and then once you have what you want, you can save it, and then after they hit submit, that message will come up and will help them. Okay. Do you want your respondents, so the people who are doing your surveys, to be able to see a summary of the results? So if this, do you want to see what kind of people said? Now it doesn't tell you who said what, but it will give you a summary of what people, let's say this is a pizza party vote, and kids really wanted to know, what are we going to have next Friday? What kind of treat are we going to have? You could turn this on so that kids could see kind of how the voting's kind of going or whatever. Okay. But again, for our purposes, we're not going to turn that on. Oh, I missed this one. Can you allow them to submit another response? Well, no. But again, that depends on the nature of your thing. If this is a practice test, something like that, and you want them to get 100%, you could go yes, yes, yes. So they could respond or submit responses over and over and over again. Okay. And do you want to disable autosave? I would say don't ever turn this on. You want their stuff saved automatically. Okay. All right. Just about done this window. And then form defaults is, do you want to collect email addresses by default? Again, depending on the nature of your survey or of your test or quiz, maybe. But in this case, no. And then the last one here is question defaults. We're going to make all questions required. So that means that they have to answer all of them, or they can't submit their form or their quiz or their survey. Okay. It is much easier to from experience, it's much easier just to turn that on for every question. And then after the fact, go, okay, well, that one's not required and that one's not required. And I'll give you an example of that. Is the last question we'll create on our survey is a paragraph one. And that will be, the question will be this: is there anything else that you'd like to tell me about yourself that I haven't asked in the survey above? Right? And so we don't want to make that one required, because then they're forced to say something, even if they don't have anything to say. So then I would turn that one off, but all the rest of my questions are required. And so it's much easier just to turn a couple of them off than it is to go, okay, yes, turn on. You know, in a quiz, that could be 75 times you're clicking required. And obviously in a quiz situation, all questions are required. Okay, so that's all of our goodies there. Now let's go back to questions. Or is there anything you want me to explain again in these windows? Okay. All right, let's go back to questions. So we're almost out of time here, but if we go to the form, it will tell you what you need to do for this practice one. So multiple choice question, remember, is by default. Okay. And so, but if you click this drop down menu, there are lots of other different kinds of questions. So here's what I'd like you to do between now and our next class, which is next Wednesday. I'd like you to create a survey for a grade, topic, and subject that you want to teach. Okay, so you're going to need to follow the checklist, and you are going to need to make sure that, again, when you hand this checklist in with your survey, that you actually check all of these off or indicate in some way for me that you've actually gone through this checklist and said, yep, 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 yep. Okay. So, and then on next class, what we'll do is we will come back and I will be able to answer any questions that you have about the Google form. Is there anything here really special? Just don't worry about the spreadsheet for now. I mean, you could take a stab at it if you want. And remember, the spreadsheet is created by clicking here on the green button. But don't click the green button or the to create a spreadsheet until you're done the survey or quiz and you've done it and you know this is exactly what I want. Then you can create the spreadsheet. Okay, so we are officially out of time. So I will let you go ahead and try this on your own. Again, we are back next week. If you have questions in between now and next week, just shoot them my way. And then beyond that, what I will do is I will also in Google Classroom, I will, there is a how-to video here. If you are, if you're having problems, you can look at this video. Up here, I did say here, if there's any references to any other email accounts, just ignore those and use your RDPoly.edu account. Okay. All right. That is the end. So I will always end it this way. If you have questions, comments, concerns, stick around. If you're good to go, head out and enjoy your weekend. And then I will help you when you're back. All right. Tyler, go ahead.
What would you say would be a good drop-down and linear scale question?
Well, a drop-down could be like it could be something as simple as this. What is your favorite subject? Click the drop-down menu, you know, LA, science, social, math, you know, pick your subjects, right? And you could do that, right? On average, how often, you know, if this is a language arts class, on average, how often do you read during a week? You know, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 50 minutes, 60 minutes, you know, that kind of thing. A linear scale could be, let's say this is again, pick your subject. This is a math class. My linear scale could be this. My question could be, math is my favorite subject. And then on your linear scale, number 1 being no, and number 4 being yes. And, you know, or, you know, love it, you know, I don't know, I hate the word hate it, but love it, hate it, right? And you could create that scale. But again, it would depend on the age of your kids. If they're younger, you might want to use a happy face or a sad face or something like that in your survey. But when you're doing that linear scale, only use 1, 2, 3, and 4. So when you're setting it up, don't use a 0 and don't use any numbers above 4. Okay.
All right.
Make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Let's see if there's anything else. How many questions should we have, just in general?
Well, in general, like on the form, it says that you need to have at least 6 questions. So you have a multiple choice. You're going to have a short answer, which is first name, last name. So that's two questions right there. You need to have a paragraph answer. Remember, my example was, is there anything else you'd like to tell me? That kind of stuff. Because this is just a survey. For the quiz, the paragraph answer could be like an essay type of question. Okay. A checkbox is just that. It's just checking off multiple answers. And then the drop down we explained in linear scale. We talked about. Checkbox could be, you know, based on this question, click all of the answers below that you know, whatever you know are versions of the color blue. You know, click all the correct answers. That kind of idea.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, give it a stab. And like I said, if you've got questions, you can either reach out to me between now or Wednesday, or on Wednesday, we can talk about them on Wednesday.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, you bet. Okay, let me just see here for a second. Let me drive for the last one I'm doing. Cassidy, you bet. Hold on for 1 sec. I'm not sure who all had their hands up first. So Cassidy, since you're top of the list here, yeah, Felicity, the answer to your question is I don't know if she's there, but the answer is yes. Okay, so Cassidy, tell me what you want, what you want to do for me here, or what you want.
I just am trying to do like the assignment that we did last class.
Okay.
And for the step 13, please take a screenshot of the file you made a shortcut for.
Yep, you bet.
When I try to say add shortcut to drive, it doesn't bring up that, it doesn't do anything.
Okay, so I'll just go back to this folder. So remember we were working with, I don't know, we were working with these files here, right? So,
Yeah.
right, you right clicked and then you said add shortcut to drive
Yeah,
and it didn't do anything?
and mine didn't.
Okay, why don't we do this? I'm gonna stop sharing. Why don't you share your screen? Do you want to do that? I'll stop presenting. And then the present button is just 2 to the left from the red leave the call or hang up button on your Google Meet window. Why don't you share your screen with me and then I'll see what you're doing. And then that way I could help see what you're doing if you're doing anything wrong.
Okay.
Okay.
I think that it's working. My computer's saying that I don't have permission. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
If you want to help someone else while I figure it
You
out.
figure that out and you bet. I'll be here. Callie, what do you got going on? Are you still there? Hello?
Hello, so sorry. My internet is so glitchy today.
No worries.
So I have two questions for you. Do you want us to upload this assignment to Google Classroom and hand it in before next class on Wednesday, or just have it done?
When is what did I say was the due date for this? It's the 21st.
I
So
think-
this will be due next Friday. So we'll talk about it on Wednesday. So that'll still give you I still work on it. And then if you have any questions, it still gives you a couple days to fine tune it before you hand it in.
Okay, perfect. That's great. And then my other question is, what if like we wanted to do for like grade 2? Could we do like a first day survey? Like tell me a few things about you and ask some questions to kind of get to know them a bit better?
Yeah, for sure. Generally speaking, this type of student survey that I do is exactly that. It's like the first week of school, the first couple weeks of school, and I want to get to know you a little bit better. That's exactly really the intent of this survey.
Okay, so I could definitely do that then.
For sure.
Perfect. Thank you so much. If I have any other questions, I'll just shoot you a message if that's okay.
Sounds great. Thanks a lot.
Have a good weekend.
And thanks, you too. All right, Miss Cassidy, did you figure it out?
Okay, I'm sorry. I think I got it to share.
Okay.
I think I can get it to share.
Okay, you do that, and I'm just going to stop recording.
Oh, see, every time I press